Welcome to Wisdom for the Wilderness, a weekly podcast by the pastors of Overland Church, where we talk about the Bible, theology, different cultural topics, all over the place, different things we get to talk about, all ways we can really pastor and shepherd our church. Last week, we talked about a really riveting topic, and that was taxes.
Did you pay your taxes?
I got them done and I sent them into my accountant to look over. So
I actually paid mine.
You paid
yours.
yours.
I'm in the clear.
Okay, yeah, yep. I'll write my check on. I'll put it in the mail on April 15th. It will get postmarked on April 15th. But we talked about this concept last week of rendering to Caesar what is Caesar's, and rendering to God that which is God's.
Yeah.
And so, they're asking him this question there in the different accounts in the Gospels, trying to catch him in a trap. Should we pay tribute to Caesar or not? And they're talking about something financial.
Yeah.
Jesus then makes this statement that they marvel at because it kept him out of a trap. Render to God that which is God's. And so I think as we read the Bible, we have to determine, what is Jesus saying? Because it doesn't go on and elaborate when it says render to God's that which is God's. Mm-hmm. So how do you guys think we should go about interpreting his statement?
Brandon, you're our guest today. We didn't introduce you, but I think most people who listen probably already know Brandon Dupre, our college pastor, but also a financial whiz kid.
That's right.
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, you studied finance a lot more than Zach and I ever did, so.
And you're our stewardship pastor.
Yes, so there you go.
You're over college, but you're also over stewardship. So this is really a test. You got to get this right, man. No, so when you hear him say that, idea of render to God's that which is God's, is this just talking about money? What is this talking about?
Well, I think first we need to ask, well, what is God's then? And I think the Bible says clearly that God owns everything. I think we see this in various passages, but because God owns everything, we are entrusted to steward his resources well.
Right.
I think a lot of times we think about, like, how do I steward my resources well? But really, it's how do we steward God's resources well? Because, again, he owns everything. And so I think keeping that in top of mind is important as we approach that passage.
Yeah, and there's a parallel in the passage between the image of Caesar on the coin and the image of God in each one of us, and the obligation to give all of our lives. And so, this goes back to the greatest commandment, to love the Lord your God with every aspect of your life. But obviously, money is one of those very difficult aspects of our lives to fully give over to God, which is why Jesus talks about it so much in his ministry, more than a lot of other topics that we might major on. Jesus talks about money and debt and all of those issues.
Yeah, money, debt, how you treat the poor.
Yes,
and the wealthy versus the poor. And so when you add all that up, I mean, it's really significant. It's way more than he talked about hell. It's way more than he talked about heaven. I mean, he talked about it a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we're going to sit here and go, render to God's that which is God's, we have to go, this is encompassing. And then if you just fast forward to Acts chapter 2 and the example that the early church set for us, basically everything they had, they wanted to steward for God. Right. So even if that meant, hey, this isn't money, but I'm willing to go sell this to get money to go help that brother out.
Right.
But however that may look. So, we would establish really quick that the New Testament, this isn't just, hey, we're going to pay a tithe that's probably some people treated like it was a tax. They probably just felt about the tithe the same way they did about a tax. Giving to God isn't a tax.
Yeah.
It's not a tax. It's not paying a debt. It's not a debt owed that we must pay. Right. So there would be a difference there, I think.
Right. It's an act of worship.
Right.
It's a sacrificial gift akin to, giving from your flock in the Old Testament and various things. But Most of us don't have a flock today. Brandon might have a flock. I don't know, but so we have to give from our bank accounts instead.
And I've heard it said, giving is not a bill to be paid. Kind of like we have everything automated, scheduled. It's not a bill to be paid. It like you said, it truly is an act of worship out of the heart. Yeah.
And why do we do it? And if I can easily for me to say, well, everything I have is God's and I'll use it as he makes fit. So then do we then, what should our giving strategy be? And I think as we think about that, if we're going to say we're going to render to God's that which is God's, we can't give just everything away, literally aren't going to give the shirt off of our back. It becomes a question then about stewardship.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How do we steward all the things that God has given us, that God gave us to use? And again, it's just going to keep coming back to money.
Mm-hmm.
You steward your house, steward your car, steward whatever resources. It's when we reduce it back, it's just going to come back to money. So, today I would like to dive in on maybe just quickly the idea of should we tithe, should we not tithe, onto just the general stewardship principles of our finances for God's glory, to render to God's that which is God's.
Yeah.
So let me ask that question. Should we tithe?
Well, I don't think we are obligated under the law to tithe, but I think it is a principle that is a starting point for Christians. So the Christian obligation is to be a cheerful giver, which that word cheerful is interesting. We get our word hilarious from that word, and so it's like being so cheerful in your giving that it's absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely hilarious how much you would freely give away and joyfully give away. And so that 10% from the Old Testament is an example to us that I think is a starting point for that cheerful giving. It's not like I wouldn't see it as the low ball, like I have to. It's okay, this is where I'm going to start, and I'm going to go beyond that for cheerfulness.
Yeah. Interesting. The thing that when you're talking about it, like that kind of emotion, it makes me think of giving my kids gifts, like on Christmas morning when they come down, how excited that Jennifer and I are as parents to give them that gift.
Right.
I don't know that my heart disposition is always that when it comes to giving to the church or giving to a ministry I care about. I don't know that it always is that, but that being the command, no, we should realize this is a great investment of what it is that we're doing. So,
why do you think that is? Because I feel similarly. Why do we not get that joyful when we give to the church or to ministries?
There's probably a selfishness in it.
Yeah.
When my kids come down, I get to see that expression on their face,
immediately,
and maybe that's what makes me feel good about myself, But I would think, let's just say we're giving to our missions offering at the end of the year, and if I could fast forward in time and see a missionary in Indonesia lead somebody to the Lord, because I funded that, I think I would have that response.
Yeah. Right.
And so maybe because sometimes it seems like our giving is distant from the actual response and outcome that happens.
There's not a direct, tangible result sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe if you and you think about, say, seeing a student come back from camp or seeing someone be baptized at church, if you're thinking no, my giving helped that college student come to Christ. Maybe if we thought about it that way, it would change the cheerfulness of it.
Yeah, I think we experienced this a few months ago when we had the special offering to buy a van for a member in need.
Yeah.
And there was a cheerfulness in that because we saw directly what it was going to. But you kind of have to do a little bit of the harder work mentally and emotionally when you're just going online and doing that regular giving, is to think. And I think I'm guilty of this too, just doing it while I'm doing all my finances and not just taking a moment just to pray over it and say, Lord, use this in all these different ways that we know our giving is going to. I think if we paused enough to have that moment of reflection and thanksgiving, then we can foster that in our hearts.
Yeah.
I think that's a really practical piece of advice. If you have automated giving, when you see that email come through, once or twice a month or whatever, taking a moment and praying for that gift and for the Lord to use it and bless it, and thanking the Lord that He's entrusted you with finances in the first place.
Yeah, that's
a good point.
That's a really good thought. One question I've heard quite often is, should you tithe on your net or your gross? And you guys have thoughts on that?
Finance guy?
Gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a gross guy. I want to tithe on my gross, so what I make,
I don't think we want to be legalistic about it,
Nah.
but in general, you're thinking your gross is what you have before the government takes their part. You want to give God His part before the government takes what they take.
And I think there's another piece of it that's like the first fruit kind of offering.
Yeah.
Like I really want it to be the first check that comes out,
Yeah.
And practically, whether it's not that within how, I've set up my auto account or whatever, but it's I'm supposed to get paid on the 1st and 15th. And so I tithe on the 1st and the 15th or give, I actually, I don't want to tithe. I want to increase over tithe, right? Over time, the more I make, the more I want to be able to give. The better I can steward my resources, the more I'm able to give. I was inspired. This is the only time I've ever been inspired by Rick Warren. It's not a shot fired, but this is a Rick Warren story. I'll just throw him props. Rick Warren wrote this book called The Purpose Driven Life. You ever read that?
Yeah.
I have not read it.
I haven't either. I read The Purpose Driven Church in school, but I've never read Purpose Driven Life. But he made a ton of money from it. It's like one of the best sellers of all time. Yeah. He makes all this money. And he had already started out trying to increase his giving by 1% every year or something like that. So, all of a sudden he's giving 11%, 12%. I think at this point, maybe he was up to giving away like 19%. And all this money starts flooding in. And he got to the place where he reversed tithe. He gave away 90% and kept 10. And not only did he do that, he paid back Saddleback Church every dime they ever paid him.
Wow.
And, I look at that and I'm like, that's awesome. That's inspiring. He continued to drive his old beat up truck. I don't think he drives it now, but he did. And, there's something about I'll probably never be able to give away 90% of what I have.
You just have to write your best-selling book, Zach, and then you'll be ready to go.
Yeah, that's there's not a real good chance of me writing a paper, much less a book again in my life. So
yeah, I think when we think about giving off of our gross or net, to your guys' point, I think the heart posture behind that matters more. On, am I giving to the Lord of my first fruits, of my time, talents, and treasures? Is he first when I make my paycheck? Am I thinking through giving back to Him before other things?
Yeah, that's good. And you bring in there the time, treasures, and talents, and just circling back to the fact that when we say render to Caesar what is Caesar's, that's actually a pretty good way to look at it. My time, treasures, and talents. We just so happen to really want to focus on our treasures, our finances. So let's just say somebody's listening today and they're like, all right, this is a new concept to me of giving and tithing. We hear you guys talk about it at church. They're listening and they're trying to go, should I do this? How do I even get started? And so what advice, Brandon, in particular, would you have to somebody who's trying to figure out their financial situation to even figure out if they can afford to tithe?
Yeah, before you know what you can save, what you can give, you need to know what your spending is. And I think that starts with tracking your spends over the month, over the year, to really understand how you are allocating your finances, how you're allocating your budget. And so you might have some guesses on, I think I spend roughly this amount on entertainment, this amount on groceries, this amount on eating out. But until you actually get into the weeds of that, you're kind of flying in the dark. And so I think a great first step is understanding, what you and your family are bringing in, and then also understanding what your expenses are. And so this starts with just figuring out a way to track your money. And I'd recommend initially, you don't have to do this for the long term, but tracking every dollar that you spend for a set period of time to give you some patterns on what you spend, some baselines of what you spend, so you can have an accurate financial picture.
I would say you need to track every dollar, period. I mean, that's not like for a certain period of time. Like stewardship means I know where every dollar is going, and having an every dollar budget set up.
And I believe there's some different softwares and stuff that can help you do that. And I think one might be called Every Dollar.
Yeah,
or something
that's
like
from
that.
Dave
I think so.
Ramsey's organization. I use a app called YNAB, YNAB. It stands for You Need a Budget.
Yeah.
Been using that for maybe 10 years now, really. There's a learning curve, so you got to kind of put in the time the first few months figuring it out. But once you've got it, it's a very good, helpful system. That's what I like about it is it's very flexible too. So we have a budget, we set it up, and put money in our categories the first of every month. And the way that I do it is I'm always spending the money I made the month before. So I've got myself backed up enough that I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. I'm spending the money from March in April. And then like if I have, say, I don't know, $500 in category X, but something comes up in category Y, I can easily move that money to cover those expenses in YNAB. So it's very flexible. It's very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Initially, there is going to be a learning curve on really whatever app or system that you use to track your budget. But you learn it really quickly, and then it becomes second nature over time, and you can update your finances very quickly once you've got the hang of it.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you use? You use Excel, don't you?
Yeah, I don't use a budgeting app, but I've kind of made my own in Microsoft Excel, and I've been doing that since probably 2014, so a little over 10 years as well. And yeah, in like 30 seconds, I could tell you how much I spent on eating out of February 2015, and where the restaurants were. And that's just been really helpful to track over time my expenses. So I'm not flying in the dark, because you can't really make a budget until you know what you're spending your money on.
Right.
So you need to figure out like, oh, I actually didn't realize that I'm spending $150 on subscriptions every month. Like,
Right.
I better go check and see what
and
I'm
that's
paying
going to
for.
be a great opportunity to go. And I don't want to. And so I didn't even know. Like I had forgot about Peacock when I added Peacock to watch NFL games that one time and meant to cancel it.
Yeah.
And I don't even watch Peacock. Whatever it may be, it's going to help you get that down. So the first step would be start doing a comb through of your bank account, tracking your finances, looking at your income to spending, and balancing those things out. Step one.
Yep. Because if you try to make a budget without knowing where you're spending, it's going to be not going to make any sense.
Right.
So track your spending first, and then I think you can make a healthy budget.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Then what's next?
Well, I think giving is the first aspect, right? Like we were talking about, understanding where we're spending and then our budget, and then saying, okay, here's what I'm making, here's what I want to give to the Lord. And then building your budget based off of that initial amount there. Like that's the first fruit to the Lord.
So on my budget, first line, giving. Every month, I allocate the dollars. That's the first category that it goes into, and then I go down to groceries and the rent and all those things.
So you're telling me that your tithe and giving takes precedent over paying your house, your mortgage. You're telling me that's true?
Yeah,
y'all heard it here, folks. It is. I mean,
if I'm homeless, you'll know that it's really true.
No, I'm dead serious. It does matter that much, and that's why I say it that way. Like it matters that we render to God's that which is God's.
Yeah.
So there's a prudence that we see in the Bible that we're told, and I mean, that we should know every dollar. We should steward what it is that we're making. You start giving, and then what do you do? What's probably next for us? People are going, hey, well, I'm trying to get my life in order. What's next?
Get rid of debt.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Do you have outstanding car payments, student loans?
Probably strategy-wise, you may want to start a small level of savings. A lot of people will say $1,000. That kind of safeguards you against going further into debt, and then just start attacking that debt.
Yeah, you might want to, initially create some small emergency fund.
Yeah,
I think that's very prudent as well.
I mean, I think Dave Ramsey is a $1,000 emergency fund is one of those beginning steps, and then you start snowballing debt. Then it's after that it becomes a larger emergency fund. I think 3 to 6 months. And so, why is that all debt?
Not mortgage. I would say that doesn't include your mortgage. Credit card debt would probably be those. You typically have the highest interest rates.
Yeah,
so that's what you want to target first.
Credit card, student loans, vehicles. Those are all useless debt. And I mean, we've all had them at different points in our life. So I'm not making a moral judgment on anyone, but the fact is, you are losing money in those things because those things have a depreciating value. I mean, student debt's a little different, but you still want to get that off the table. But, the vehicle, as soon as you've drove it off the lot, that value is plummeting. So why do you want to spend more and more interest on that vehicle? It's absolute insanity. It's stupidity, actually, to have a loan on a vehicle. But credit card's the same thing. You spent, money on your groceries, and now you're paying, 20% more for that. You've got to cut that out and get on top of it.
And if you're in the habit too of carrying a credit card debt month over month, you need to, try to get that taken care of.
Yeah, that's a bad habit. Yeah. I think all of us, we use credit cards. We have to. I mean, you book with airlines. There's there's a ton of benefit to credit card, but you pay off the balance every month in order not to pay interest or high rates of interest.
I'm going to have to get a YNAB sponsorship on this, but this is what I love about YNAB is I use credit cards and I like getting the points and that kind of thing, those benefits. So when I get a transaction that comes into groceries, it takes that money out of groceries and puts it down on the credit card bucket, so that when I go to pay my credit card, that money is there set aside specifically for that.
Now, I would say maybe if you're a person who's like just use credit cards and abuse credit cards, maybe you need to cut that bad boy up to get there. But there comes like this idea of not living beyond your means. That I think is really important in this conversation. And when we say that, not living beyond your means, we're saying don't spend more than you make. That's the reality. And there may be some of us who need to make more, meaning we need a job change or to pursue 2 jobs even in a season to pay off debt. But I mean, that would be a piece of it. So you start paying off debt. I know Dave Ramsey uses a snowball method. You start with the smallest. Once you pay it off, you take everything you were paying towards that, you put it towards the next one, and you just compound them until you're knocking stuff off. But like, be pretty aggressive in trying to pay off those debts. I think it's really smart looking at the interest rates of those debts.
Yeah, I think knowing the interest rates on what you're paying and starting with the highest ones. I think a lot of people don't even realize, what interest rate their student loans are at.
Right.
And so, because a lot of times interest rates of student loans might be at varying levels. And so you want to target like the highest interest rates first. I think there's also some advice I'd give to younger people as well is once you've graduated college, even before, aggressively try to tackle your student loans. Especially as you're thinking about dating and getting engaged and getting married. If you can take care of your student loans as fast as possible, you're going to be setting yourself up well for the future.
Yeah. One of the greatest hindrances for people going on the mission field is student loans. There's just a lot of people who feel God's call, but they just can't because they're not going to make enough money as a missionary to pay off the loans they took out in college.
I would like to just say, if there's any high schoolers listening to this, come have a conversation with me about student loans and going to college and whatever else. You don't have to go in debt to go to college. You also don't have to finish college in 4 years. Your 4 years of college doesn't have to look like everybody else's. I've never had $1 of student debt.
Yeah, me neither.
And I worked like a dog while I was in college to pay for college. It wasn't just like it was scholarship. So I would just love to talk to those.
I had multiple degrees and I never went into debt with it.
To do it, right.
Yeah.
I did have student loan debt. I did 5 years at CSU, and I had
a victory lap, huh?
Took a victory lap. And I had a mix of subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Subsidized loans essentially meant that it didn't accrue interest while you were an undergrad.
Right.
Unsubsidized meant that you were accruing interest as an undergrad. Either way, both you needed to start repayment 6 months after you graduated. And so I started as soon as I graduated, as soon as I got my first full-time career job. And I lived within my means. I lived frugally, and I was able to pay off about $20,000 of student loan debt in probably 3 to 4 years.
Right.
Just being really aggressive, living with a bunch of roommates, not eating out a bunch, not buying a bunch of material items, but really just being aggressive about getting my student loans taken care of.
Yeah. And I made that, I said that to high schoolers, parents. I'd really love to have that conversation with you too. Maybe that's a podcast episode for another time, but how we think and approach, education, post-secondary education. Josh, you said something I want to know about missionaries.
Yeah.
And like there really becomes an ethical question with a missionary. Should we send a missionary who has a ton of debt, and should we be paying for that missionary's debt and bad choices as they go through? And like with the International Mission Board, when we send missionaries, I'm pretty sure that you're really you have to be pretty debt-free to go, correct?
Yeah, and that would apply to most missions organizations. They're not going to send you if you have significant debt.
Yeah.
So most students come out today with so many tens of thousands of dollars of debt, and that's prohibitive to go into the mission field.
This actually has been a motivator for Jennifer and I, because early on in our marriage, we just determined, like, if God ever calls us to the mission field, we want to be able to go. So we're never going to have a debt hanging over our head that would keep us from going to the mission field. So we have tried, and pretty much, like, for the majority of our marriage, it's been a mortgage, and that has been and it's not like we're talking about people who make a lot of money here.
Right. We're
just living within our means. So that at the drop of a hat, we could sell our house and head to the mission field if the Lord so called. Like that's where I want to be, with my hands open, going, I'm going to render to Caesar what is Caesar's.
Yeah.
All right. So we're paying off debt.
Yep.
What's next?
I think if you are in a career, in an organization that contributes to your 401k or 403b up to a certain percentage, that you should try to contribute up to that same percentage. So if your company says we'll match your contribution up to 3%, then you should be paying 3%, because you're just leaving money on the table. And so I think understanding your company's policies, and if they're going to match anything for your retirement, then you should make that a priority, because you're leaving money off the table if you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot to be said about saving for the future, and retirement's how we do it. I think the Proverbs speaks to that over and over and over. The ant stores it away for winter. Don't be a sluggard.
Mm-hmm.
So paying into retirement matters. I think, there's wisdom in not just thinking, hey, Social Security, pay for it. Right? There's wisdom there. So save for Social Security. What's after saving for retirement? You save for a rainy day. We said that 3 to 6 months or more. 3 to 6
months. You probably want to keep that in some sort of liquid account, that in case you need to access it pretty quickly, you can access your 3 to 6 month emergency savings account.
And then you want to start budget items that build up over the year for things that are significant, that are coming. So we talked about taxes last time.
Right.
If you're going to have to pay out of pocket, then you want to build that up rather than take it from your general emergency fund. Things like that. If you have property taxes or, your vehicle registrations coming up, then you save for that throughout the year as well.
Or if you're going to have some repairs on your vehicle or some home maintenance or renovations that you need. Start thinking about those as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think here's where I think when we generally have this conversation where it doesn't go, where I want to take it for a second. And so let's just say you are at the point years down the road and your finances are in order. You have done these things and you're making good money and you're saving good money. Is it just to invest in the stock market, which I think for some people is the best choice, but we have like entrepreneurs in our church. Should you invest back in your own business? Should you invest in rental properties? Yeah. Should you should you take your money and try to make more money, or should you just give it away, or should you just put it back in the stock market and not think about it? Like, what do we see from the Bible when we're thinking like, what do we do here? What like the Lord has blessed me. I'm being successful. What do I do?
I think living generously is kind of the theme of that. And I think how that plays itself out could be a little bit different in those options that you gave.
Yeah. And so there's a prayerfulness that we all need to have in making those decisions because, ultimately you could invest a certain amount in rental properties. You're getting so much back, and then you can be more generous with the income you're making. But at some point, you've got to say enough is enough, because you could always say, I can make more and more and more money off of this money. In Ephesians, Paul says, let the thief no longer steal, but let him have something to meet his own needs and then also the needs of others. And so I think that's the general framework for Christians. The first thing God has given me beyond giving back to him is to meet my own needs, and then to look around me and to meet the needs of others around me. It's not just for me to continue to get a bigger house or a better car or more hobbies or all of those things. At some point, we have to say, enough is enough. This is for others.
Yeah. I think I'm reminded of what Jesus says in Matthew 6. He says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Yeah.
I just got done preaching to college students at base camp, and we talked about money and finances, and from Ecclesiastes, and talked about the oppression of the poor. And helping the poor. And basically, I think for some people, God gives this, he's poured out financial blessings on them that when they have enough and it's reasonable, they should really figure out how to use their finances for human flourishing. Yeah. And that may be, I'm going to build, like the Lord's blessed my company, I'm going to build the best company that I can that blesses employees, that I've got people working for me. I'm not oppressing them. I'm paying them a fair wage. I'm investing in them. I'm teaching them. I'm giving away. I'm using my company to do good.
You're providing stability for them.
For families. Yeah. There's a level of stewardship that comes with success. The more success you've given you, God's blessing you. That you should figure out, man, how do I really use this for His glory? And you just keep doing it. And, laying up for yourselves treasures on earth is not gonna last. And, our wanters are broken. Like we want more and more and more. You have to get control of that, or it's going to leave you empty and depressed, and so getting to a place of where like, no, I'm going to use the resources God has given me for good.
Yeah.
Right.
That's where you have to get. We talked about in our Healthy Churches series that healthy churches, they steward the resources for God's glory.
Yeah.
Well, healthy disciples do the same thing. Mm-hmm. Both healthy churches and healthy disciples steward their resources for God's glory. And so render to Caesar what is Caesar's, but way more importantly, let's render to God's that which is God's. Let's be wise managers of that He's given us.
Yeah, amen.
Man, in closing, Man, do you guys have any words of wisdom for us?
I would just warn us against judging one another in this area, because there's a lot of things that we don't know. And I just reflect on, we have the widow mite story, and I've known people like that who have nothing and give incredibly generously. But I've also known plenty of people who, you look at the outside, they have the fancy house, they have a boat, they have, all of these things. And someone might say, well, they're being very selfish with their money, but they are incredibly generous beyond imagination, and people don't see it. And they don't know the level that they're actually giving at. They just see the outward side. So just, let's be loving and non-judgmental towards one another in this area.
Yeah, that's great. I'm also reminded, we cannot serve two masters.
Yeah.
So we need to not serve the master and the Lord of money, but we need to serve the Lord God Almighty. And I think we need to accurately look at ourselves in the mirror and see and ask myself, am I living within my means? Am I tracking my spends? Am I creating healthy budget categories? Am I living within my means so that I am stewarding what God's entrusted me? The Lord has given us however many talents. What are we going to do with them? And so I just, encourage you to look at yourself in the mirror and ask some hard questions that can be painful, but I think it's worth it, and I think it honors the Lord. I think He cares how we steward His resources, right? Not our resources, but His resources. I just leave you guys on that note.
Yeah. I would just remind us all that giving is an act of worship. It's an act of faith, because you're giving going, am I going to be able to do without this that I'm giving away? And is the Lord going to provide for me? And I just want to read a quote from Randy Alcorn that I think just gives us incredible wisdom here. God's money has a higher purpose than my affluence. Giving affirms Christ's lordship. It dethrones me and exalts Him. It shifts my vested interests from earth to heaven, from self to God. Giving breaks me from the gravitational hold of money and its possession. Giving shifts me to a new center of gravity, heaven. Yeah. So, man, with that being said, I think we could probably talk about this a long time, but we better land the plane. And so I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, just email wisdom@overlandchurch.org. We'd love to answer your questions. And until then, live with great wisdom in this crazy wilderness that we walk in. Blessings to you.